Hey, welcome to yet another Q&A Saturday. I am Alison Beer of alisonbeer.com, where I work with adults who want to reignite their creativity, learn to draw their very own cartoon characters, and look at life through a more light-hearted lens. Today we are building on what we did last week, so if you haven't seen that video yet, go back and take a look. But what we're doing is looking at how we can add depth by using a ground line and a directional shadow. So now we're returning to the same little person that we used last week and exactly the same scene. You can see how having a ground line in the front like this really creates a lack of depth, and that's not what we're trying to do. So this week we're going to try and look at creating depth in our picture by changing the position of the ground line. Well, actually there are a few things we can do, so let's have a look at the possible solutions. And we have three possible solutions that we're going to look at today. The first one is looking at putting the ground line behind her rather. The second one is using a directional shadow, or else we can of course use a combination of the two. Let's take a look at using a ground line behind her first. So it's possible to have a ground line in front of her, but we don't want that. We would rather have a ground line behind her because it creates this sense of depth immediately. So this ground line is kind of in line with the bottom of her skirt, not ideal, but immediately does give us a sense that there's a space behind her. And we can define that space even better by putting a corner in so that there's a context. It gives us a sense that she's in a room and there's a whole lot of space around her where she can start interacting with people or with things. And that's exactly what we're looking to do. Now last week we looked at using a shadow to ground our character, and we used a shadow that looked something like this, as if the light was coming directly from over her head and just casting a shadow in a bit of a puddle around her feet. And that was what it looked like. Of course this works perfectly well to ground our little person, but it doesn't work so well to add a sense of depth. So let's have a look at how we can do that now. So if we want to add a sense of depth with a shadow, let's imagine that the light is shining kind of from here towards her, and we want the shadow to cast back in this direction. We can go and put in our shadow like this, and I'm not going to worry too much about how it looks, what its shape is. I'm just wanting to put in some sort of a shadowy sense that there's a shadow going along the ground here. Make my brush a little bigger and take it out like this. So that immediately gives us a sense that there's something going on here. We'll give it a little bit of roundness and play around with feet and arms and things. There we go. So that gives us a sense that her shadow is being cast back, and it gives us a little bit more depth. Now we come to our third and final possibility for adding some depth to our character. And let's imagine that once again the light is coming from this direction. So it's somewhere here in front of her. And we are going to have a shadow that's cast backwards. But what we want to do is combine both a directional shadow and also a ground line behind her. So we'll pop our ground line back in. And now we'll have a look at the shadow. So if the shadow is being cast from here, first it will fall at a bit of an angle behind her, but then when it hits this junction with the wall, suddenly it'll go kind of straight up, and that's going to be interesting. So we will have a quick look at this. Let's imagine that her legs are going to cast a shadow backwards like this, and this leg will be somewhere behind her, and then we get to the wall and suddenly it goes quite straight up, and we can have kind of round her like this. Okay, I'm going to try and get it to give us a bit of shape there. And now let me just rub out the bits that have gone across her front. I did this so that we would get a nice smooth shadow. It wouldn't be all patchy, but I did have to draw over her a bit. So there we go. And now this bit, because of course her shadow needs to join up with her foot, because there's no ways that her shadow wouldn't join up with her foot there. And there you have it. So you have a directional shadow going behind her and a little bit of interest where it hits the wall, and it's just more interesting and gives us that sense of depth that we are looking for. So that's how you can take your simple cartoons from having no depth to having plenty of depth and a whole load of interest if you add a shadow as well. Did you like this video? If you did, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube and share it with all of your friends. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel there, and if you would like even more tips that I only share on email, head on over to my website www.alisonbeer.com and sign up there for email updates. Keep drawing, because just 15 minutes a day, a tiny little bit of time, can add up to a tremendous amount of progress if you just keep going. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time on Q&A Saturday.